Awesome. Well, welcome to HR Doctors. I'm super excited to have Lana join me today. HR Doctors podcast webcast is dedicated to bridging the divide, solutions for better employer, employee, and job seeker connection. Lana, thanks for joining me. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me today. So I've been in the recruitment industry for, oh my goodness, like 18 years now, I think, a long time.
Amazing.
And in that time, I've spent beginning of my career in agencies. So I was an employer agencies for about 6 years. And then I moved to the corporate side with Walmart, and I worked for Walmart for 8 years as well, and then with Maple Leaf. And I've also run my own consulting firm in the talent acquisition space, and I currently work for an organization called RF Smart, where I lead their global talent acquisition.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited to have you with us today and dig into some of the topics we discussed. The first one, and I know these numbers won't be as accurate when this goes out, but as of last night, I pulled some data in Layoffs. For those who haven't been, there's a site, it's layoffs.fyi. And through 2022 and 2023, there have been 1,384 tech companies with layoffs. Wow. I believe it's North America, and 261,653 people that have been laid off through that. You and RF Smart are in that space, and just wondering what your take is on that, what you're seeing, and how that's been affecting your company, the market in general. Like, what are you guys seeing?
So I probably get a note at least every other week from an executive in our organization with that particular site. It's a big topic, I guess, in all of tech, but doesn't really impact our organization that much, other than we'd like to recruit from those layoff companies. Yeah. Well, let me share a little bit why. So I think what we've seen is a lot of these, especially the tech giants, overhiring in the last couple of years. There's and I've heard this also through my colleagues. So this is not just my guess, but I don't think it's just within tech. So I think we're starting to see it in other places as well, although maybe not as large. I think it's, I've seen it before in my career where you have projects or you're building new technologies to adjust to a new environment in the marketplace. And so you hire all these people to do that. And then, you let them go afterwards. But it was really different during COVID and during the last couple of years, because the market was shifting in terms of what was needed in the marketplace, with people being, 100% remote and lockdowns and all the different things going on. But as we kind of, I guess, return to the new normal, I think that's having a big impact on those organizations. I also get the feeling that when one does it, there seems to be a trend of it. Oh, it's okay, we can do this now. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but certainly it seems that the more do it, the more do it. So it seems to be self-perpetuating. One of the things about the organization I work for is that, unlike most of these tech layoffs, we're 100% privately owned, and we have no equity, we have no debt, and very cautious about, even though we're growing really fast, about adding headcount that we can't sustain during bad times. And we happen to be in the supply chain software as a service industry, and supply chain is a big thing right now. So we are actually growing really fast. And then we're thinking about, how do we help all these folks? How do we help 261,000 people? We can't directly, but how do we as an industry help these folks transition, find new jobs? What does that look like? Some of the things I think are really important in this space are reskilling, upskilling, like a lot of the boot camp activity happening now. Sure. I think is, helpful, especially if the layoffs are related to individuals who've been with an organization a long time. So that's one of the things we're doing, is we actually have our own boot camps for that, so that if we have people whose skills are not relevant, we are actually retraining them.
Right.
And then on the how do you attract all the individuals who've been laid off? I kind of feel like there's still a lot of opportunity out there. There's still a lot of jobs. Like unemployment is still really low. So I think, people are still being scooped up pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, we're kind of noticing the same. We don't recruit in the IT space, but I had a chat with a couple different friends of mine that are in the external talent acquisition space, specifically in IT. And if anything, it's been a bit of a breath of fresh air for them, where there are some people that have been extremely hard to hire for highly in demand positions that are coming into the market, and some companies that weren't able to compete with the arguably overinflated compensations at times that some of these positions were paying, because of the scarcity in the market, have made it more achievable, to where there were even some clients of theirs who had projects on where they just shelved the project because it wasn't feasible for them. And now, those projects are kind of coming back on the table to say, hey, is this something we can actually make happen now? What are your thoughts? I mean, I feel from a visibility standpoint, some of the information that we see through channels like LinkedIn is the high visibility of people that are hurt or frustrated with the way that these layoffs have happened. Now, I mean, again, it's I think the content that becomes most visible is maybe sometimes the outlier, or maybe it's the common opinion, but just voiced by few. I mean, I guess in understanding of the employer side, it can be challenging if you have to lay 10,000 people off in one shot, that you're not going to be able to have a personal conversation with each of them. You're not going to be able to have that conversation before, locking them out of the technology platforms that they're utilizing. But I wonder, like, what you think when we hear that there's people out there saying that they're not being fairly treated, and that there's this kind of negativity. I mean, it's not the first time in the world that layoffs have happened on a large scale.
I've never seen layoffs like this, though. So
Sure.
I've been a part of layoffs. I've seen organizations do layoffs. I've been blessed that any organization I've worked for has been very kind and taken a very personal approach to it. I got to be honest, I was shocked by some of the way people have been laid off. There's two sides to me on this. There's the employer side and the personal side. But being in recruitment or the HR space, I tend to empathize a lot with the individual who's being laid off. I think that it depends on the company what's appropriate. I think that if you are about to go bankrupt, if you don't do it, it might look a little different than if you are still highly profitable. And I think it's a mistake that some of these larger organizations that are still extremely profitable, that are going to continue to be profitable and large, are doing layoffs the way they are, because it's going to impact their employer brand. It's going to make it more difficult for them. People are going to think twice before they join. They're going to be like, whoa, that could be me in 6 months or a year from now. They could just be hiring me for this project and then I'm just gone. And so the investment you're going to get from that employee into your product, into your future, might not look the same because of this behavior. So I feel bad for the person, but I also see the consequence for the organization of of the way they're doing the layoffs. And I don't think it's being well communicated why they needed to do it that way. I think if there's a reason why they needed to do it that way, beyond we just wanted to do it all in one shot, which I don't think is the greatest reasoning, unless again, like you're about to go bankrupt or something. But even in those cases, I've seen people being treated more humanely than I think sometimes they're being treated right now.
Yeah. Fair.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, you're bang on in the sense that if you create transactional relationships with your workforce, then it's hard for you to expect anything else from those people. And I know, as we dig into our discussion further, on the back end is your retention strategy. And I mean, we'll speak on that further, but I know there are many situations where high impact performers who to replace someone like that on your team would take you months. And yet there are times when we get, a limited notice period of the, the standard 2 weeks. And you kind of go like, this isn't giving me any chance to, go to market, find a suitable replacement, work in conjunction with you to onboard and support this individual through their transition, support you through yours, and ultimately ensure that the sanctity of the company is protected. And maybe that comes through their kind of view of the transactionality and a almost a fear of being open and honest about what's going on their side out of, being negatively impacted for it. And maybe that's something that's created internally.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, the impact is to the people who are left behind too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Not
totally.
just the people who've been laid off.
Yeah. One of the things that I've kind of phrased as a way to help my clients is what I call the 3 pillars of successful hiring and retention. And there's a lot of different ways to articulate this, and there's lots of different strategies around it, and maybe other components that aren't included. But my 3 pillars are your first being your vision, your mission, your culture, your values, and ultimately who you are as a company, where you're going, how you show up in the marketplace, how you show up to your internal team, to your customers, and to your investors or stakeholders. Next being your recruitment, talent acquisition strategy, and how you go to market, and ultimately how you hire people. And then lastly being how you onboard, how you coach, performance manage, train, and ultimately create that retention strategy on the back end. And in our pre-chat, we talked about mission and values and how that's been a really foundational piece for you. What does mission and values mean to you, and how do those, or I guess maybe first is, do you feel that those, I know we haven't talked about them before, but those 3 pillars, do those, I guess, align in terms of the way you see recruiting and retention and the strategy? Is there other pieces to it that maybe aren't included in mine? What's your kind of view on I guess that holistic recruitment and retention component?
Well, I think that's the kickoff. That's your product. That's what you're selling in the marketplace, right? As a recruitment function, it feeds into the type of audience you're going after, the messaging you're using. So yes, I definitely think it's super important. And then the rest of your extension of that is really the employee life cycle, right? So all of that feeds through the entire experience of a candidate through an employee. And then I even think it extends for when that person leaves you, because your boomerang strategy and your reputation doesn't end with the person who leaves, who resigns, or who you lay off or whatever. That's a continuance, right? So I think your strategy also extends your mission, your values. They extend into your reputation with those who used to work for you. I'll tell you that I haven't worked with Walmart since 2019, but I still feel a deep connection to them from a values perspective, because their mission and vision and values are extremely clear. And you felt a part of that when you were there. And you felt a part of that even when you left, right? So, so those things are, I agree with you. They're very critical to recruitment.
Well, it's such a great a segue in. We talked briefly at the onset about how when you were with Walmart, there was approximately 90,000 people in Canada. You were the director of talent acquisition with them. And it's so cool to hear that you still feel aligned to the vision and the mission and the culture and the values within the organization, even since your departure. What was that, I guess, that mission and value piece like from an organizational standpoint of, and it doesn't have to be specific to them, but I think it's such a great example of you identifying and creating alignment or understanding alignment for yourself when you come in, and how that applies corporately, and also how that vision rolls itself down to, you've got, a large contingent of the frontline workers, and just how that organization made that vision and values real.
Well, so they have a unique story that way that starts with Sam Walton. It's just never gone away. It's
Right.
been an extension of a culture that that he started there. my experience, and I obviously used to work, in the staffing side too, is that it's really rare to have a mission you can connect everybody to every day in everything they do. But that mission gives you a purpose. So when you're stuck, you think back, what's the mission, right? Like if I'm stuck deciding what to do or how to move forward, is this aligned to the mission? Is this aligned to our company values? Does this fit within that or not? Both in what you're building, like whether you're in TA or in a different, finance or sales or wherever you are in an organization, you can connect back to that for driving the company forward. And I think that's like super important because it creates continuity. And it's driven really by leadership, and the front line has to exist on both. And it can't be artificially created. Like your company has to be founded in it, and it has to be a continuance of that founding. You can't all of a sudden create it. I think creating culture is really, really hard. I know a lot of companies go back and try and recreate their culture or do things. I think that's really tough. You almost have to start from what is our mission as an organization? Why do we exist? And one of the reasons I joined RF Smart, actually the primary reason was this. They have a very clear mission and very clear values that everyone is connected to. And so it's very reminiscent of my time at Walmart from that perspective. I feel very connected to the work. And when I'm thinking about what I'm doing on a daily basis or how to attract candidates or whatever, it's about like, do you connect to that mission? Does that mean something to you? Do these values mean something? Do you connect to them personally? Because if you do, you're going to be excited about going to work on Monday and and solving problems for the company.
Yeah. Who do you think is ultimately responsible for the creation, not necessarily implementation, but I guess the creation and then the not the longevity, but the values and culture and mission living within the organization? It's one thing to conceptualize.
Your founders create your mission. Your mission can change. A new founder or but the owners, like that's where it has to come from. But it also has, a really strong CEO and a really strong owner understands how to foster culture on the front line, not just at the top of the house. It's meaningless if it's just at the top of the house.
Well, how have you seen the successful ones do that?
You have to focus on the front line as the most important. Like, honestly, that looks different in a SaaS. So in a SaaS, the developers here, the sales folks here, the front line who's with our customer, that's where it matters the most. Like, it matters everywhere in the organization, but those are the folks where our mission matters, right? Who are touching our customer, who are building product for our customer. At Walmart, it's like the cashier, the people working in the store. They're the ones who have to really, where your culture's fostered.
Right.
Because that's who's serving the customer. So, I've always been in environments where you're serving, but ultimately everyone has a customer, right? Like, someone's paying for your product. So, but your customers are where, the front line, whoever's facing those folks, that's where you have to really foster, I think, the culture. And then it kind of feeds into everything else.
Yeah. How in an organization with a lot of people where it's easy for those lines to get blurred or for the water to get muddied, like how do you make sure it trickles down the way you'd want it to trickle down all the way to the front line?
So there has to be a direct connection between the most senior people in an organization and that front line. The more bureaucracy you have, the less that's possible. So, right. Describe it. Yeah. Like, that has to exist. The flatter your organization, the easier that is to happen.
Sure.
the more traditional it is, and I mean traditional from like that hierarchy, like glass ceiling kind of environment. I'm gonna make a joke, but the more it's like Mad Men, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's
Sure.
not, yeah. So, uh, moving towards, uh, moving towards realizing that we all have different accountabilities and responsibilities depending on our position in an organization, but that everyone, everyone's ideas and what they feel and think and how they contribute to the organization is just as important. Like, that's when the CEO and senior leadership connects to that, then I think things start to look like, I think you start to have a better culture
Yeah,
of
agreed.
listening, right? Like, there's the key, listening.
Nice. Awesome.
Okay.
We talked about
I feel like we're getting really philosophical here.
No, it's awesome. It's fantastic. I mean, that's the, the crux of the issue, that I think, if someone's struggling on that particular initiative, that trying to find either the issues or the the solutions, and the path that one took to get there. So I think it's helpful and insightful. We talked about talent acquisition and how you mentioned that there's no easy solution. You're currently in a industry where you're in that SaaS space. You're recruiting for highly skilled, highly demand individuals in a market that up until this layoff period was even more difficult to recruit in. You've also been recruiting in an industry, like we said, where there was 90,000 people. You've been in manufacturing and production, lots of frontline, lots of blue collar. Like, what have, I guess, some of the greatest challenges that you've been faced with, and how have you, tried to identify ways to overcome them? And if you've had success, what's kind of unlocked some of that potential?
Okay, so if I can think of a theme that kind of goes for everything in my career, it's identifying what's going to make a great employee.
Right.
And I've never been anywhere yet where the thing that most people focus on, although I'm with an organization that I would say for developers is here, but there's this theme that the experience of somebody and their skill are what most hiring managers assess for, and culture often comes along with that. But there's this gap of that means somebody's going to be good. That means somebody can come in. What is the term we used to use? Hit the ground running. Then come in and hit the ground running. And I've always fought this. Don't hire for the person who can hit the ground running. Hire the person who's going to win the race, who's got the longevity.
Oh, I love that.
Who's going to grow with their job, who's going to be successful over time, not just in this moment. And that's a barrier I've always had to lean into from a TA standpoint. In a corp, actually, even back in the agency, it's you still face this when you're dealing with clients, right? Like, how you want the purple unicorn, but is the purple unicorn going to be a purple unicorn in 3 years from now when all your technology's changed? Right. So now I've tried to, one of the things I think is part of the solution to this is competency-based hiring and behavioral interviewing on what are the traits we need for someone to be successful in this role now and into the future. So as things change, this person's going to continue to be successful and add value to our organization, because it allows you to be future ready, not just in the moment have somebody be able to do a job.
Yeah. I had a really interesting discussion with a client of ours the other day, and it ties so well into this, which is there are many roles and positions where there's a skill gap in the market, and there is a willingness and desire from a client of ours to hire somebody who is at the upper echelon of the knowledge industry specific knowledge and skill, who can come in and really reduce that runway and hit the ground running and be an impact player short term and long term. And I think a lot of times the desire in doing that is also to remove some of those barriers that can create turnover or a lack of longevity, in the sense that you can hire somebody who's highly motivated, who's got the aptitude, but who may come into the organization, and whether it's a few months or a few years, put their hand up and say, you know what, like, I hadn't been in the space before and I'm now realizing it's not for me, versus someone who's been in the space for a long time and is highly passionate about it. But in my conversation with one of our clients, they were looking, hey, we want to hire somebody with these skills and this experience and this, background and this education, all these things. And it goes, okay, well, we can, potentially try to help you find those things, but you're hugely narrowing the market. You're going to make it extremely difficult to hire. It's going to be extremely expensive to hire this individual. And, why is that what your desire is? And they go, well, we just know this is going to be who's going to be the most successful. And I said, okay, well, of your team that exists right now, who are your most successful people? And they named 2-3 people. And I said, well, what were their backgrounds? And they didn't have any of the background they were looking for. One of them was previously a teacher. And this was a first sales position, and they were looking, they need to have a few years of sales experience, a few years of industry experience, this and that. And the people who hadn't been successful as of late were people like that who were coming in. And I think the interesting thing is that when they hired those people, they were less involved in the onboarding and training and coaching and development pathway, because there was an assumption that you just know what you're doing and you're going to get it. And it was a total false sense of security, where maybe they had a good foundation, but you still needed to teach them the way you do things, your system, your processes, your approach, your strategy, your policies. And that when they brought someone in new who didn't possess any of that, that they really took the time to hold their hand and guide them through it. And sure enough, as I mentioned, the people they listed who were the high performers were the ones that hadn't had any of the background that they thought they needed. And all of a sudden the conversation shifted and they go, well, you know what? Okay, actually, let's go and hire based off what we've got right now, which is high aptitude, highly motivated, great culture fit. And all of a sudden the doors are wide open, and they've had a significantly easier time of seeing great people, being able to interview more people, and ultimately hiring some really phenomenal people that fit, who are highly motivated, and then work through the business systems to help get them educated and up to speed so they can deliver.
Yeah, I bet you this is a very common experience. So you asked a whole bunch of recruiters to ask hiring managers, and I'm sure most of them have the same question. They're probably going to get a similar answer. Is the top performers are not just the people who had this. They're never going to say it's because they came with this experience and these skills. They're going to give you the traits that make them successful.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
The competencies. I have two that I don't know. I feel like I'm giving away a trade secret here, but I have two. I'll give you one.
All right.
Well, I have two, but I think the single most important, or the gateway one, is curiosity. I think it's super critical to look for people who question things, are naturally curious. And I mean this across any job. People who are curious, it's like when you're a kid, you're going to learn better. You're going to be open to change. You're going to be able to move with change. It's not that it's the only, there's lots of competencies that are really important, but that particular one I think is universally important to all of us.
Well, it ties in. Our core values are, HR doctors: helpful, resourceful, driven, relentless, and sensible. And I feel like it really ties into that resourceful piece of, we want that creativity so that you can deeply uncover where the issues lie, and ultimately help come up with strategies that will help solve those problems. So I couldn't agree more that it's almost like that introspectiveness, that ownership piece of being accountable, but also, wanting to solve the bigger picture issue and not absolve yourself of that responsibility.
Yep. 100%.
Nice. That's awesome. Kind of tying into that third pillar, we talked about that value piece, how, for me, that third pillar is about your pre-boarding before the person starts, your onboarding once they are there, coaching, performance management, having clear expectations, supporting how you show up for your employees. And you talked about value and how it's greater than a paycheck. And how, that ties into a couple different pieces, but maybe I'll open that to you. Why is value such an important a piece for you to, I guess, help people understand within the organization?
Well, that's your connection to people, right? So that's your heart. That's like, you got your heart for your for your around your doctor there, but that's what it is. So but there's different values at different stages too, right? And so the first is, what's the value of the job, of the role? What's the value of the organization in the world? What is the value that you offer your employees, or otherwise known as your employee value proposition? And most value we talk about is the corporate values. Obviously, you need alignment for corporate values. They're what make up your culture. But what are the values an employee gets out of working for your organization? So these things are often harmonious. They should be harmonious between the corporate values. But we're just getting into this work at our Smart now, but I can tell you, I'm pretty sure one of the greatest ones here is wellness. We have a high focus on overall wellness, both in giving back and mental health, and in health, like an actual health. We do a lot of stuff around total wellness of the person at our organization. I can tell you, I'd be surprised if there was many employees who didn't feel a connection to the to that particular value and it bringing value to their life. So the employee values are the things that an organization does culturally that enhance the life of the individuals who are working for them. So there's those values, and there's the corporate values, which are usually related to how we behave in terms of our values towards our customers or our clients, right?
Right.
And then, this is a part of the cycle you're talking about at the beginning of our conversation. So how does that fit throughout that entire cycle, and how do you derive a sense of belonging through it? Because that's what creates that belonging piece, whether and that extends it beyond the person working for you. It's part of your retention strategy. It's also part of your boomerang strategy for bringing people back, and your referral strategy, because if people feel highly connected to you that way, then they're going to tell other people, whether they still work for you or not. They're going to refer people to you. The values here, even though they're not articulated, our employee value proposition, are so strong that last year, almost 50% of our hires were referrals.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's such like a phenomenal tie-in. As you said, they complement one another. It's this kind of holistic thing. I don't use this platform to try to sell my business and to try to say, oh, you should recruit with Express. I just feel, in fact,
you should. No,
yeah, maybe
kidding.
Someone out there is telling me I'm an idiot for not doing it, but I really feel that, the piece obviously that we do is the recruitment piece, but we offer advisory services to our clients to go through and say, yeah, we can do the recruiting for you, but if you want to do it, we'll give you our playbook, we'll give you our briefcase and help you better understand, how we can maybe be a supportive resource, or whether it's, a back pocket resource and ultimately you're going to do it on your own. Well, I'll help you make sure that you're doing it as best you can, especially if you don't have this size of an organization where you can have this depth in HR. But I think in terms of that, value greater than the paycheck, as you touched on, the first being that deep. And you've hit it for yourself. It's why you said you were so well aligned with your previous companies, and your current one is that vision, that mission, that culture, and how that creates a deep tie-in, that even if another company came along and it was like, hey, Lana, we really want to hire you, we'll give you the exact same money to come and join us. And you go, well, that's great, but no, and even more money. I'm really aligned. I really feel like I've got to fit here. I believe in what we're doing. That's such a huge, intangible value proposition. Then you've got, I really feel compensation is lost a lot of times in the equation, where it's as an employer, our job is to create and I just interviewed Dave Ulrich, who is fantastic. He was the job of any company is to win in the market. And that's the best thing you can do from an HR standpoint, is help the company win. And if the company's winning and profitable, then hiring, your vision, mission, your employee value proposition becomes a lot easier. But that salary that the company's paying the employee, is that exchange of here's what we need you to do, you're going to do it, here's what we're going to compensate you to do it, and we need you to do it in a way that helps us win. And then outside of that, then we start to tie in these additional perks and benefits where we can go, okay, we're going to have whatever we need to within our capabilities. And of course, the Googles out there are going to do crazy stuff that not every company can do. You guys have 400 employees and have way larger budgets than my company of less than, than 20, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's certain value propositions you can or can't do. But ultimately all those things tie in, like you said, which I think is such a profound piece for businesses to really be aware of, which is that value that you create that is greater than just the paycheck. And I don't think you have to compete with the Googles if you're not the Googles, because, we're not competing for the same people, but how are you maybe competing for the best people in your space, in your market, and how that all kind of ties in.
It also drives into performance.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not just a bit. So I can pay somebody whatever at Google or whoever else, other big tech organizations, or organizations. And that might be able to help me attract someone, but why you don't want it to just be a paycheck or just transactional is because you want that person to believe in your purpose and your mission and be connected to it, because they're going to do better work for you.
Right.
So it's, even if I was one of those, even if you are a gigantic organization with like millions of employees and it's still super important, because, having that intrinsic thing where you want to perform because you want to make something better because it has an intrinsic value that you believe in. It also creates job satisfaction, and, because we as individuals want to have a purpose in our work. We spend the majority of our life at work. If we don't feel that value or that purpose, what was the term that they used last year? Quiet quitting. That's what happens.
Yeah.
And I think quiet quitting is actually a symptom of what we're talking about, which is not feeling the connection. I don't think it has to do with like paycheck, and I mean burnout's a real thing, but I think that a lot of it has to do with us feeling connected to that purpose. And if we don't, it's like, well, I'm just going to do the minimum I have to do.
Right. Yeah. In terms of, if we I guess look at from an HR perspective, I suppose like the different customers that we serve, we've got the employees or job seekers out there, we've got the internal team members, and then we've got leadership. If, it's either someone watching, let's go from a leadership perspective and work our way down, within any of the topics, do you feel there's like a most critical or a piece of advice or something? You've been in this space for a long time from a talent acquisition perspective. What would you say to leadership? Like, if you're not doing this right, start doing it, and it'll affect change.
Oh my goodness. That's a big question. Brett.
Yeah.
What kind of change? What kind of challenge do you think? Can you give me a specific on the challenge you think that I'm trying to give advice on?
Well, I suppose if it was a company, whether they struggle with their talent acquisition or not, that seems like it's the area where you, have had the most focus in your career. So whether it's a company out there that, feels they've got TA dialed, and maybe it's keep doing this, or maybe it's somebody who's struggling out there. I think a lot of companies are struggling to hire in general. And the next question will be on the employees. There's a lot of people out there that are struggling to find good jobs. So I guess the first would be for the company that's having a hard time hiring in their market. What would you suggest? What's like one thing that you feel has been either a linchpin?
Okay, I'm going to go back to what I was saying before, because I think that is the breakthrough. It's think about what are the traits that make someone highly successful. And I think that starts, I would give the same advice to the executive team that I would give to the hiring managers, which is really understanding what your company, where you're looking to go as an organization, like what is your mission and what is your strategic plan over the next 5 years, and what kind of from what you've seen, what are the traits of success that will help you in your companies and moving in the direction your company is going, and focusing on looking for those in the marketplace, not on this is on my resume and I have this skill and this. It's looking at that instead. And if you can do that, you can find all sorts of amazing talent, and you're not going to be competing with it in the same way, because because most employers aren't doing this. Okay. And being with a smaller organization where our name's not necessarily known everywhere, you know, you kind of have to do this. But you know, you can get much better at doing it. I think that's the journey we're on, but I don't necessarily think that, you know, and sorry, let me switch over to the candidate side now. As a candidate, how do you express your value beyond your experience? What are you bringing to the table? I'm going to pitch a company. It was a not-for-profit called Launch Code that I've worked with a lot. And they have a program called Coder Girl. And they do retraining or reskilling of individuals who come from different careers, and they teach them how to code. Amazing organization, and they have their women who've graduated from this program do a video and like show all their work and all they're capable of, but they have a video and they express for the employer, hey, here's who I am, here's what I'm about, here's what I bring to the table based on my past experience. So like, you know, I was a teacher, now I'm a coder. How does that differentiate me? Well, I'm, you know, here's what I'm bringing to the table now. I have great leadership skills. I have great communication skills. I can, you know, translate technology into layman's terms or whatever it is, right? But for all candidates, how do they translate what they bring to the table beyond that experience and skill set? And then if the employers are open to it, that's where you can kind of meet up. Because I'll tell you, one of the things I hear a lot from people we hire is, wow, you guys gave me a chance. No other company would even look at my resume or call me, but you called me. You were willing to like explore, you know, what I'm about and see if there could be, you know, an opportunity for me to work there.
Such sage advice. I mean, again, with that disconnect in the market, you know, companies having a hard time hiring, job seekers struggling to find opportunities. I couldn't agree more that companies need to you know, either find ways to be even more competitive in the market to find that top tiered individual. And if that's not possible, then you need to look at like, what are the competencies? What are the behaviors? What's like a great person look like, and almost build a business school internally on how we're going to hire amazing people and give them the tools they need to be successful. And again, complete mirror on the job seeker side. You know, I talk to a lot of talent acquisition people. We work with companies all day long to help them hire. We obviously get a high volume of applicants. And I don't think anybody out there expects a cover letter or expects a video or expects anything in their application process. But there's nothing out there saying that you can't send something along with your resume, whether it's an email, whether it is a cover letter, but not the generic, like, I'm a hardworking individual. It's how do you understand what this company is looking for? Transactional applying isn't getting anybody anywhere. If you're just, here's my resume, I'm sending it to the job, unless your resume is 100% a dead ringer. And I would really encourage anybody to really be introspective and take stock and go, it's almost impossible to know from an external perspective that your resume could be 100% of a fit for a job that you're applying for. And so what are you doing as a job seeker to help whoever it is that's seeing that see the value that you bring and demonstrate your understanding that employers are hiring people to turn that relationship into profit for the company? And if you don't see that, and you're not willing to invest in identifying the company and understanding who they are and finding a way to articulate the value that you bring, you're leaving a lot up to chance. And that's probably where you're uncovering these situations where it's like, nobody's responding to me. Yeah. And I always go like, unless you're really doing an amazing job of putting yourself forward and networking with these companies and engaging with them on LinkedIn and finding their different decision makers and really taking concerted effort, if you're just applying for jobs and that's all you're doing, you're probably, which sucks because it's like, it shouldn't be that hard. Well, it is. Unfortunately, it is.
Well, and networking, like, so that leans into networking.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the networking can help you with further understanding your value or what's going on. And like, it's not just about getting into the company, but getting that information. Like, and I don't know if everyone's skilled at networking to uncover that, right? I think, I actually refer people when I know people personally who are looking for work, I often refer them to strong recruiters so that they can get that help. And recruiters are, keenly aware that they need to sell the value of somebody beyond the resume to their client. So
100%. Yeah, you're so right. Yeah. Well, Lana, really appreciate you for joining me. It's been helpful for me. You've shared some really great insights. I hope whether it's a employer who kind of hears a little bit about how they can maybe manage through the divide and the disconnect or this end piece for job seekers. Again, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.